I hit start. Can you all still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know, for some reason, the moderators, it doesn't even give us the video. I don't want video. You all don't want video. You don't want me having video. Oh, I do. Yeah, the chat thing is on, though, so we will be.
We're live.
I thought David Gormley said something else. It said Joey's ready for Duck Dynasty. It says Duck. I'm sorry. I thought it said something else. They got all this stuff set up automatically. Like it starts playing that entry video that everybody sees and then kicks on. And so in 1 minute, I'm going to just say that we're getting started. And if you all know how to share your screen, I'm assuming you know how to do that, correct?
We hope.
Okay. Because it doesn't give me the option. So
I thought I was already sharing my screen.
I don't see anything coming up. It's a blank screen. Now I see ArcGIS applications and project development.
There we go.
They had been putting up a some sort of just a generic thing that shows you what the class is and who the speakers are with your all's bios that runs continuously until 2 o'clock and then it kicks off. So
blame Lindsay. She clicked go live.
You told me to. You told me to hit the button.
Gotcha. Michael Leather sends me a text that says we can hear you all. I know you can hear it, Michael. That's why we were. All right, guys, it's 2 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and get started with the next session. My name is Brad Gregory, and no, I'm not one of the 3 people you see on the screen there. I'm the moderator for today's for this track for technology. But I'm with HMB Professional Engineers in Frankfurt, which is sort of coincidental that the 3 presenters that we've got today are also from HMB. We've got Lindsay Walker, Joey Mosley, and Jarrod Johnson, and they are going to give us a presentation on ArcGIS applications and project development. So with that, guys, I will monitor the chats and the questions, and I'll interrupt you if I see a question that needs to be answered. But outside of that, you guys feel free to just go ahead and kick it off.
Okay. Brad, thank you very much. And on behalf of our whole group, we'd like to thank everybody that's decided to share a portion of your afternoon with us. We're excited to share some of the GIS tools our team has been using for for data management and for project team meetings. Before we get into the presentation, I want to put a little disclaimer on here. We felt like that it would do this a disservice to try to cut slides out of these story maps that we're using. So we're trying to run it live today, and it's worked excellent on other virtual platforms throughout this year. We're seeing some pixelization, and we don't know if it's a compression issue or a bandwidth issue with this platform, but we'll try to go slow through each one of these slides to give the screens time to catch up. A lot of our discussion today, we're going to demonstrate how these tools can be used to improve some of our meetings. So as we were brainstorming this presentation, Lindsay made the suggestion that maybe we present some slides from PowerPoint presentations we've done in the past to kind of show the improvements that the story maps are going to bring to our meetings. So I immediately wanted to volunteer. I told her, I said, one of my superpowers is my ability to make good data look bad. So I want to start with showing you some slides that we've used during past meetings. You may have used these same type of slides or seen something similar. This first one is from a project kickoff meeting for a phase 1 design study. And, generally we're getting the project team together to review scope again, talk about some of the issues on a project, and then talk about some of the solutions we're going to look at as we move forward. And generally, as we prepare for those meetings, we want to be as informative as possible. We start building a bunch of background data, and we'll prepare a presentation like this slide from a PowerPoint. We'll also jump out of a PowerPoint presentation to go look at things in Google Earth or maybe supplementary PDF files. In addition to that, we may bring handouts and ask somebody in the project team to try to fumble through and find some obscure reference somewhere. So the point I'm wanting to get at is this is good data, but when you look at this presentation, it's just kind of meh. I mean, it's static. And when you combine this with jumping between multiple tools, it's not as efficient of a meeting as it could be. This next slide, I've been guilty of doing this before. I'm kind of exaggerating it here by showing a general summary in a PowerPoint slide. The point I'm trying to make is in PowerPoint itself, it's very difficult to read this. When you try to zoom in or zoom out to see detail, it's really rough. We've done the same thing with typical sections in the past. So generally, we will jump out of PowerPoint during a presentation and go to a PDF file. This next slide is the first time I'll talk about GIS. This map was built through GIS tools. It's a great looking map. It conveys the message that we want to present to the project team. It shows the limits of this project. It shows where it's located regionally. And we used it in public meetings. We used it in the DES for this project. But at the end of the day, it's still just a static map. So the point I'm trying to make is that we're not saying anything new here. Every one of us use GIS in some form or fashion each day, but we're just using a fraction of its capability, kind of like this map is. KYTC already has online all these tools that we use. They're interactive mapping, their HIS database. There's probably not a day goes by that one of us doesn't use something from that, but then we plug it into a product that it stays stagnant. I'm projecting my own experience here a little bit. I've always kind of viewed GIS kind of like I do my own retirement plans. I've been to training to understand it. I like to talk about it or try to sound intelligent to the cool kids. And I've known that it's going to offer some great benefits someday. But I've never had that real aha moment until now, how we can fully integrate GIS into our project development process. Jarrod, if you don't care to go over to our data management. This first piece here is a pet project that I'd had for years. I wanted to try to come up with something that would allow a project manager to completely interface with their project and manage everything, manage schedules, access files. And when Lindsay and Jarrod joined the HMB team back in this past winter, Jarrod messed up and mentioned that he was pretty handy around GIS tools. So he volunteered or got voluntold to try to interpret my babbling and try to stand this platform up. So what you're seeing is it kind of replicates what's online with KYTC for any of their general maps. And this particular application is geared toward pavement rehab. You can see the entire state, and you can see a list. The color-coded lines on there are active or inactive pavement rehab projects. And depending on how what toggles you select, it will be active or inactive. So you can drill down by county or by district. And we're going to go look at one in Boone County that's active. When Jarrod clicks on it, a custom toolbox or a dialog box opens up. So we wanted to be able to provide instantly some background data on what this project is. You can see the item number. You can see some descriptions of what the project is. We put mile points in there and also some design criteria that might be handy. You've got the average daily traffic, the number of crashes, and it's really limitless what you can put in there. But the really interactive piece of this is we've also put slots where the project manager can determine or select whether the project's been authorized or not, or whether you've assigned a designer. And when you get down to your milestone meetings throughout the course of the project, they can actually enter in this dialog box what date those were held. If you don't care to back out of that, and we'll go show a link. So we've also linked this to OneDrive. So any project file that you've developed through the course of the project, you can go to one spot, click on it, and access it from anywhere. And the last piece that kind of makes this really awesome for tracking progress in a single project or for a whole program is you can export all of this data to a spreadsheet. You can sort it, and you can have an instant update on where any project stands. You can see any milestone dates, see what the critical statistics are for the route, whatever you want to look for. You can also input data through the spreadsheet and upload it back to your map. So us roadway guys were reveling in our accomplishments, and not to be outdone, Lindsay and Jarrod they had to outdo us and show us the interactive mapping, which Lindsay's going to start talking about now.
Thanks, Joey. So you can see on the side bar there, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that we can use this ArcGIS tool. The data management from a planning study to the design pieces of it. So one of the pieces that we've worked on here is using this and trying to collect information at the beginning of the study on what there might be as far as needs or issues and spatially locating those. This was a great project that we're showcasing here as an example. It's the AA highway, a planning study. Our objective for this study was to look at the AA highway from Pendleton County all the way over to Carter and Greenup counties. So about 120 miles of the AA highway, and looking at identifying locations and concepts that help to deal with safety and operational issues. So when I say that 120 miles of any highway is a lot of roadway to look at, and then you start to put it in the context of you're dealing with 6 counties, and that means 6 different local officials, entities, county judges, different cities, mayors. We have 3 area development districts that we're working with, also including Kiowa. So that's a lot of different people that have different input into this project. So how do you manage that? How do you try to collect input from all these different people? How do you balance out the needs of different communities? Because this is also a slightly diverse area through here, where you have some of the more urban area associated with Maysville, and then more rural sections as well. So one of the things that we initially did with this was we said we want to try to be able to collect this in a more graphical format and have people place markers basically on the map. Because you get to those meetings, a lot of people say they're looking for their property, or they'll say, well, I have an issue at this location here near this intersection. And they're looking on the map for it. So why not just put the spot on there? So Jarrod, if you can put the list of input, the layers there. Cool. So you can see here that we asked for a couple different items on this. We asked for people to identify committed, identified projects. Now, when we start a study, we're typically given all the identified projects through the CHAF database, and we'll look through the highway plan and figure out what's there. But sometimes local officials have spots or some local projects that they might be working on we don't know about. So we asked them to put a place marker for that. We also asked for a couple other informational pieces, such as future developments. That's going to impact how we look at some of these places in the future. If you know that there's going to be some large developments coming online, well, we might want to take a closer look at that area. Same thing with the major traffic generators. We typically would identify schools and churches, but there might be something else of the community that we need to know about. So those are some of the issues that we collected just from an informational standpoint. Then we also wanted to get some information about places that people might like, such as a strong place. And that means something that if the transportation cabinet implemented a design or an operation at a place and they really like it, say, you know, hey, say this is a good thing. We don't always have to focus on the negatives. So we can take that and say, well, they like that, so maybe we need to look at some other places to apply it. And then the weak places, those are places that have been identified as issues, those little triangles there. And Jarrod, when you click on one, you can see that they could put their input on this as well. So you can directly put in your comments about why it's an issue. And multiple people can continue to put these in there, and this is a real-time collection of information. If you are expecting a lot of people to put place markers in there, there's other ways of managing this too, instead of just dropping a marker in, that you can ask people to continue if this is a place, you know, noted in there. So there's a couple different ways that we could do this, but this worked really well for this project. And the other thing that's really helpful with this is that you can get your summary information pretty quickly out of it as well. So trying to figure out how many people had responses on certain things, it'll put together a quick little bar chart for you. The other thing I want to note related to this particular situation, we were lucky enough to be able to do our first round of local official stakeholder meetings before the pandemic hit. So this was not in response to having to do everything virtually. It was really because we wanted to do this because of the study area and wanting to provide a different way of showcasing the information to the attendees. But it also does work really well in the virtual environment. So in the in-person environment, what we did was we had a presentation to the attendees, and then we had stations where we broke them up into smaller groups. We had this up on the screen, and then we asked them, said, where do you have concerns, issues, committed projects, planned developments? And Jarrod was running the screen on one of the stations, and the person would point out a place, and we'd say, here, we drop the place marker in for him and make some comments. So that was one way that we were doing it in person, and then we sent them the link after, and they could continue to add more to it if they had time or if they weren't able to attend. So we were able to do this fairly straightforward with the folks there and actually show them how it worked and do the demonstration. So it's an in-person and a virtual tool as well. So we'll go to the next one, the planning study piece of this. And this is still, we're going with the AA example, and we have a couple other study and project examples as we go through the rest of the presentation. But this is a little bit further into the study, but we thought this is a good example just to show overall information. And at the beginning of the project development phase, what we can do is collect all of that and have that information put together in one place that makes it really easy for us to be able to look at different things and see how they work and interrelate to each other visually, instead of having that pile of spreadsheets open or printouts laid around on our desk. So if you go to the interactive map, Jarrod, what we'll show you here is, this is great for a couple different reasons, that project team meetings, local official stakeholder meetings, trying to show information on this. There's different ways that you can have that instead of having to have, like I said, multiple things open. But all the layers, like through GIS, that you go to KYTC's website and you can go through their interactive map and identify features. These are all linked into here, and so they can update with real time. And we can share different files on here and see how they work. So we put in the track projects, or identify projects. So that's one identification piece on here. So those pink dots show up in the lines where we have projects. So that's one piece of background information that we're looking at and say, okay, well, we know where those are. And then we can see how that relates to maybe where we put other spots. And the box pops up with all the information related to it, the description and the score, if it was sponsored, all of that kinds of information. The traffic volumes, those are on there too. It's another layer that we can look at. So if you click on that and you zoom in, you can see what the traffic volumes are through different sections. Yeah, you're going to have to zoom in just a little bit closer to see that. So, and that's a KYTC layer right there where you have the traffic volumes. So this is kind of a combination of ones that are pulled from the GIS database and then some that we've made ourselves as we did that evaluation, existing conditions, baseline information. So when we do our crash analysis, we'll put those in there, and Jarrod's going to share one of those a little bit later on. But the geometrics, I wanted to click on that. So we looked at vertical and horizontal deficiencies, and then being able to add that line layer in here. So then we can look at it. What's the traffic in one spot? Is there a deficiency there? Is there a high crash rate there? And seeing those pieces come together, then that can really help us with that spot identification and understanding that, well, this has been identified by the stakeholders previously. This has a high crash rate. It has geometric issues. Instead of combing through multiple different surveys to go through all of that, it's right here. And then you go to meetings. So then you might be trying to find something or looking back at it. You can't find it, but you can zoom in and look at it real time. I know there's a couple HSIP meetings that I've been to before, and we're looking at the intersection, and then we might go back to another spreadsheet, or you might go back to Google Earth and the KMZ file to look at something. But this is a little bit better tool in our opinion that allows you to have everything kind of at your fingertips to look through stuff. And even for working project team meetings where you're sitting around and you're trying to figure out, well, what do we need to do at this location? You can click on and off things and work through it together as a team or an individual and try to make some of those decisions. So it just gives you a lot of information that you can look at together or turn off and on and look at it in different lenses, which is a very powerful tool in trying to come up with those concepts and figure out where we need to go with things. Okay. So the other things that I wanted to bring up with this is that just from an overall study perspective, and if we're having a meeting, Jarrod, if you click on the study review, then we can embed like typical PowerPoint slides in this. So for this example, going through the background of it, we can have the schedule brought up in there. It's pretty easy to do that. So if you're still doing PowerPoint and you want to put it in there, do that, dump it in here, and you still have your interactive map that you can work with as well. The other thing that I was going to go to is if you go to the concept development tab, and as I mentioned before, that you want to link to other things on the OneDrive that I think Joey noted. So this one takes you to our table. So instead of having another file over there, if we need information about a project or a concept and why we didn't further consider it, it's right there. And so we're having the meeting and somebody asks a question, well, why did you not consider this location further? Then we go back to that. And then we have like all the concept sheets embedded in this too. So when you do click on the improvement concept sheet there, then you click on one of the dots, it'll bring up a summary of the actual concept. So you click on that and the PDF's in there. So that just kind of gives you a good example of how we've tried to compile a lot of this information, put it together, use it to try to delve into what the issues are and identify some of the spots and put summaries together and use it for the multitude of different ways. As I said, project team meetings, local official stakeholders, Jarrod's going to get into public meetings in a little bit. And then also just for general project use to try to come up with things. So that's kind of an overall review of how we've used it from the planning perspective. Now, it doesn't have to stop with that it can go into the next phase of project development, phase one design or preliminary design. So Joey's going to go over how we've applied it to that as we move through this presentation.
Thank you.
Joey, take it away.
Thank you. I'll give it time to load here. This is going to be the story map that we used for the kickoff meeting on I-71's widening over in Oldham County. To give you a little bit of background, this project is immediately adjacent to the iMove project that's ongoing right now. We mentioned my bad slide at the beginning showed an example of some of the data that you would put out during a kickoff meeting, and that's exactly what this meeting is also. If you look at the organization of the page, the tabs across the top that Jarrod's showing there, each one of those tabs are talking points or basically the agenda for the project for the meeting. As you click in each one of those tabs, the map recenters and the data down the left side of the screen changes. So that's, as Lindsay mentioned, that's their PowerPoint presentation to the left, integrated with a map, so we're not jumping back and forth between different softwares. I'd love to drone on all day about every one of these tabs, but I just want to highlight a few things that we went through with the project team and kind of give you the feedback we received from the project team meeting. Jarrod, if you want to start on the existing, this project has a bunch of structures on it. There's several mainline structures and crossroads. So we pulled data from the bridge data miner, and when Jarrod clicks on existing structures, you can see the same symbol that is embedded at KYTC's mapping. Zoom in on 329 there if you don't care. So we can click on either one of those structure icons, and immediately the dialog pops up, and you can see sufficiency ratings, span lengths, any pertinent data that's in the bridge data miner. It's here, and it's always going to be current. One of the issues that we're addressing with this project is 329 underpass, and we're going to have some alternatives to widen the roadway. If you don't care to scroll all the way to the bottom, instead of jumping out to Google Earth to look at Street View, we had already loaded images from the bridge, so immediately the project team could see where the substructure, where the piers were located adjacent to the existing roadway, And you can also see that there's haunched girders overhead as well, so that's going to present clearance issues. Just a quick way to show that you can visually represent an issue and keep the project team looking at the same thing at the same time. There are a number of other structures on the project. As we were providing this review, we started talking about the couple box culverts that are on the job. And normally any widening project, you would look at extending the culvert that's there. And Andre, he did us a very good favor. He asked a question. He said, Joey, are these box culverts, do they have a do they have a step top slab? And he said, I'd like you all to check in on that. Well, we were fortunately, if you click on bridge reports and plans, we had preloaded all the existing plans for this. Now, we weren't thinking of that exact question, but it just tickled me to death that we were able to be 2 clicks away from showing them the existing plans for that culvert and answer the question immediately. So I owe Andre a adult drink of his choice at some point still yet. If you back up to the main map again. Next, I'd like to talk about how we combine different layers so the project team can start looking at some of the issues for the project. If you go to the crash history tab, we're starting out here in the map recenters, and you can see there that the 5-year crash record for this project shows that there's 829 total crashes on the project. And the way we started this is we've plotted all those crashes in a heat map, and as the heat color intensifies, that shows where the higher number of crashes happen. Jarrod, if you don't care to zoom in again on 329. As he zooms in, you can see the resolution changes, so you can start seeing the individual crashes. And those are intelligent points also. If you'll click on one of those, you can actually see that represents the KSP crash data. So you can scroll down through it and see the basic conditions of what happened and just the blurbs of the actual crash report. We can also click on manner of collisions, and that resorts everything and color codes it based on the type of crash it was. And we've got an index or a legend over on the right side where you can see the different types. Now, this is where it's really handy for the project team to start combining different pieces of information to start drawing out where some of the issues are and help identify the things we need to be looking at. If you don't care to click on vertical alignment. So we've overlaid the vertical curves that's along this stretch of I-71 with the crash data. And the diamonds that are colored in green, those are vertical curves that meet design criteria, and the ones that are shown in red do not meet design criteria. So zoom in on that one that you're close to there. Now, any one of these, you can see there's some clusters of crashes around them. Now, Jarrod clicked on the actual curve itself, and you can see it's a crest curve at 604 feet of sight distance, and that's deficient. So there's a lot of accidents happening or crashes happening in that area. Now, I don't want to make a direct link to those, but that gives us, that leaves some clues for us as the project team to start looking here and dig the next level down and actually look at the crash reports to see what conditions that the officers recorded in the field, and that will help the project team ultimately make decisions as we move forward. If you don't care to click on project scope, here we skipped on over, and this is the point where we were reviewing the design criteria that we were going to use for the project. You can see that listed down to the left. If you don't care to click on the typicals tab there, or the typicals button. Before I showed a bad general summary that would have been in a PowerPoint presentation. Well, here we can zoom in and zoom out, and it's crystal clear, or should be crystal clear for the project team to see what the template's going to look like, and we can discuss it in depth. Click Glen Arm Road overpass. One more concern. I mean, there's a lot of concerns on this project. I'm just trying to hit some highlights of how this tool works. This is the Glen Arm Road overpass. It's an overpass over the main line, much like the mainline bridges that go over 329. This is an existing haunch girder bridge, and by the time we widen the main line, we're probably going to have clearance issues with the existing superstructure. So we're going to be looking at a couple different alternates, and normally you'll be looking at building a parallel bridge and maintain your traffic on the existing, which that option can lead you to more right-of-way or utility impacts. So the other option that you could suggest would be looking at closing that road while you reconstruct a new bridge right back where the old one was. If I'm hearing that, the first question I'm going to ask is, well, what's the detour length? Well, we tried to think ahead of that, and we built a little map here that instantly we could pop it up. The whole project team could see the distance and the time it would take to do a detour around this structure if it were closed. Now, we didn't use this as a decision-making tool yet, but down the road when we get to PL&G, this may help the project team to make some decisions. We'll also use it in public meeting interfaces to gauge public reaction. I think this is a really good example of how building these maps this way, again, we mentioned early on that we try to bring as much valuable data to these meetings as possible. Well, here we've thought of data or thought of questions that people would ask, but actually built maybe a scenario that could address that question. And I think that just does a better job of keeping the project team informed. The maps that Lindsay had showed you also had an interactive tab as well. Ours has this at the very top of the screen there. If you get into discussion and you want to toggle different layers that we didn't have pre-programmed in some of these tabs, if you want to compare crash data to horizontal alignments or to bridge clearances, it's basically limitless how many layers you can build into this. So after we concluded the meeting and we were preparing for this presentation, I wanted to reach out to Andre and Mike Loisel. I wanted to see if they had any feedback, and their solicited but totally unbiased opinion was that the meeting went really well. They appreciated how it kept everybody's attention focused on what we were discussing. It was one of the first virtual meetings. I guess it was one of our first virtual team meetings, and we're very happy with the way it went, and we appreciate the comments that they gave us. Moving forward, whether it's in-person meetings or virtually, we're going to be using this same tool, and we're going to treat it as a living document. Those tabs across the top, they may change depending on what meeting we're going to. If it's a PL&G, then you'll be adding data to review your alignments. And anybody that's heard me get on my soapbox about DESs, I think that builds your narrative that goes into your DES. This is also, it doesn't, Jarrod's going to talk about public involvement here in a moment, but it doesn't, this tool doesn't just end its use in the design process. You could couple it with a GPS enabled device, and our environmental teams could go out and have any of this mapping that we've built, and they can locate themselves in the field when they're identifying issues on the project, or the right-of-way or utility teams could use it out in the field when they're coordinating with property owners or utility owners. So we've just started scratching the surface of all the usefulness of it. I will transition to Jarrod to talk about public outreach.
Thanks, Joey. We'll let it load here. So last application of these tools we want to show is through public outreach. As it loads, this is an example of a corridor study. It was I-64. If it'll load here. But as Lindsay and Joey were saying, what makes this great is that you can just build upon each one of these, whether you're starting with the planning study, moving into project meetings or stakeholder meetings. There's really not a lot of rework to get this up and running for a public meeting. This was our first virtual online only public meeting, and it was up for about 30 days with collaboration with D5. And basically what you do to get this up and running is just make it stand on its own. So just take what you had for the previous presentations and add enough detail to make sure that people can see it and understand it clearly without the need to have a presenter. So like I was saying, this was our first virtual only public meeting. We'll want to continue to meet the public meeting guidelines set by KYTC or other clients. We'll never be able to replace face-to-face meetings with the public, but these tools can be a really good supplement to those. For instance, if someone can't make it to the meeting or isn't interested in making the trip, then they may find it easier to just get on a website and use one of these links and basically do it on their own time and take as long as they want to review as much of the information that they want so that they can provide the most informed feedback. And that's always what we're looking for in these public meetings. There's also tools in here for ADA. It will describe what they're seeing on the screen. You can even put in videos in here, giving instructions or welcome video, or also an actual guided presentation through the story map. So with all of the different capabilities and information, we're trying to make sure that it's concise, but also providing enough information for the public to give well-informed feedback. So we'll just continue to learn about what works with these and tweak these to get the best input that we can. So one thing about these also is that you can integrate surveys. So we've chosen to go with ArcGIS's own survey 123. This comes with the ArcGIS online for free, and it also is really well integrated into the ArcGIS ecosystem. But you can use any survey link you want, whether it's MetroQuest or whatever. And you can integrate it in a lot of different ways as well. We chose to send out a survey response or the survey link on top of the story map, because on a phone, it's a lot better to have that separate link. Having all this information on the phone can be a little overwhelming, but for things like surveys and interactive maps, the phones work really well. And we've got pretty good results from these surveys, which I'll show you guys. An interesting thing about these surveys and a really cool thing is that they give you live updates. So if I click here, you can see the survey responses that we had over time. Another interesting thing to note is that social media was by far the most votes for how did you hear about this study. So that just goes to show how many people are probably using their phones or websites to find out about this information in general. So like I said, this stuff gives you live feedback, and it's really easy to get the reporting of it and to export it. And just overall, all of it really integrates well together. And so with that, I'll kick it back over to Lindsay to give the wrap up.
Thanks, Jarrod. And I think that's those were some very interesting points that we pulled out of the I-64 study and the survey about how we're communicating to the public about the study and how they're getting word of mouth with it. District 5 does a great job with getting that, working with us and getting that information out there using Facebook and the Twitter, those options, and Facebook Boost. That was another tool that we implemented as part of this, paid for that. And I think that also gave us a nice little bump on that chart there. Because I think the first one was related to just having the local official stakeholder sending something out related to their newsletter. And then the next one did a little bump because of the Facebook Boost. So a couple different things that we're learning. We continue to learn how best to reach out to people in this new climate. And as things continue to evolve, we'll continue to monitor that and go back and look at these charts and graphs and kind of digest them just from learning about the study itself, but then also to learn about, well, what can we do for the next one? So to generally wrap this up, and then I know there's at least one question in there. We really understand that GIS has been around for a while. Clearly, there's the interactive database maps and everything on KYTC. Lots of data out there that we can all access, but integrating it into our projects, I mean, we've realized that there's a whole world here that we can just barely dip our toes into as far as using that data, putting it together, and just basically streamlining it more than what we have in the past. So I think that's what we've been trying to showcase with this presentation is, yes, ArcGIS applications, we've been using them, but have we really been using them to their full potential? So I feel like we've started to get into that and found some very effective communication mechanisms for this. Being able to put all that data together, putting it in one spot, and also using it more in a visual context. I feel like a lot of us are that visual learning base, and being able to see what you can apply to that, have different layers, and get that information out of there is very helpful. So I think that's pretty much what we had. We're adhering to the typical, I guess, partnering conference, like 40 minutes. But questions, we are open to questions at this point. And I guess I'll start off with the one that was in here about how would this data be preserved for a records request? And it is a learning process as we do something different. Jarrod's had a lot of background information going on with making sure that we can shut down surveys and how do we share stuff? Is it okay if it's public? If it's not, can we make it private? So many questions on those other little logistic pieces of this. And the very bottom line basic thing that we have done, for one thing, is you can make the screenshots once you do set up this database here. And that's at least a baseline application of how you have collected this. And the actual back end part of the data, that we do get the spreadsheets and we get the comments, and then that we can save for the public record. Do you guys have anything to add to that comment, Jarrod or Joey?
No, I think you nailed it.
Hey, so we've got another question that was in the Q&A. So just letting the folks out there know, you can ask a question through the chat or the Q&A. Elizabeth Neiman had asked, what is the learning curve for using all of this? Do you need ArcGIS training? I'll throw that out to whoever. I'm assuming probably Jarrod.
Yeah, so I do have quite a bit of a background with GIS, with a lot of figures and things. So it's hard to answer that, but I will say that there's been a lot of people at our firm that don't have a lot of GIS background, and I've shown them the steps to get started on this. And they've done a really good job at creating some of these story maps with little assistance. There's a lot of drag and drop. What you see is what you get, features for all of these applications. So they make it really easy.
Yeah, Brad, despite the shade you just casted upon some of us, like Jarrod said, we've developed, we don't have a written workflow, but he's been coaching some of the guys in the roadway group enough that, we're starting to build our own through this group. So I don't think you would have to have a full-blown GIS background to be able to build it.
Guys, I'll let you know. So we're actually going to end this session at 2:45. So we've got pretty much exactly 5 minutes left. So that gives everybody time to get to the next session and get signed in and whatever. But just to let you know, there will be, if you attended the first session, you know this, but if not, when you close out of this, there will be an evaluation form or an opportunity to evaluate, and just reminding you that if you want to track your PDHs, you can do that from the original, whatever this program is that we're using for this thing, Umbrella, from the Umbrella web interface. You can find the PDH form out there. So any other questions from you guys, feel free. And if you raise your hand, we do have the ability to unmute your mic if you want to ask a question in person, or you can type it in, either one. One that I've kind of come up with, some of the stuff that we've been working on in the western end of the state, is how to address some of the EJ population, or some of the more economically depressed or technologically deficient folks in this process of public involvement using web interfaces and that type thing. Is that something that you guys have had to deal with any at all, maybe on the I-64 project?
Not yet, not in particularly. We do offer the social and environmental justice as part of the input process, but I think that's something we definitely want to look into as we continue to move forward to meet those guidelines. This was our first one, but we were definitely looking into other ways, like the mailers and things like that, to try to reach everyone through this. Lindsay or Joey, do you all have anything to add about potential EJ?
Not on that. It just depends on where we're at in the study process, if we really need to incorporate it into the planning study or the time. It just depends on all of that. But I feel like, frankly, we can pretty much put whatever we need to in there. We have had a couple of those concerns about, typically the sensitive items that archaeology or some of the environmental features. And if we use this and we use it for a project team meeting, making sure that it's not able to be accessed by the public. So those are some of the other things that we've had on our mind as far as trying to make sure we're putting together good information and sharing it with the right people too.
We've made some suggestions on some projects. We've not done this yet, but we're planning on pursuing maybe setting up some kiosks in local courthouses or libraries. And I don't know if that will be a totally interactive kiosk or if you just take, like Lindsay said, and make screenshots of these presentations. We want to put as many ways to make it available for people as possible.
So we had, I guess, Tanya Higdon had mentioned there that there had previously been a question about how could we preserve this data. I think, Lindsay answered some of that previously, saying that, really the only way right now, the baseline way that they have is to print out hard copies or screenshots of this to preserve it for the future. I know some of you are saying you're having some trouble with the screen shutting off or losing the video feed or whatever. Looks like it's still working fine on my end, and I haven't heard anybody else. So it may be something with your personal connection there.
That was the purpose for the Mosley disclaimer.
About 1 minute left. I really want to thank Lindsay and Joey and Jarrod for the presentation today, and we really look forward to the applications of this in the future. I appreciate everybody attending, and I'd say we'll probably get cut off here in about a minute. So you guys have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we also need to say thank you to Matt Sipes because he's been our co-collaborator on this, kind of on the back end, and he's helped us brainstorm and put this presentation together. So Matt with HMB, he didn't get to put his mugshot up on here, but he's been really great in trying to get all this together for us.
All right, guys, thank you. We're jumping out.